It's Friday, November 22nd. Welcome. I'm Ryan Whitwell. I'm here with David Ruddock. And before we get to the titillating discussion on 5G, it's about time we brought up the Galaxy S11 for the first time on the podcast.
Yes, we should also bring up my aneurysm that I'm apparently having right now, or stroke, something.
Yeah, I'm actually a little worried. Can you smell toast?
Oh, that's my tea. Yeah. Scared for a second there.
Good. Okay, so we've gotten the first render leaks of the Galaxy S11, which are, they're perfectly believable. I don't think there's anything very startling about these. So this is the thing we've seen a lot. They come from OnLeaks, who gets usually CAD files from phones that haven't been released yet and creates renders based on them. So this looks a lot like the Note 10, but got more cameras. It has the same center hole punch camera like the Note did, as opposed to the one way off to the side like in the Galaxy S10. But yeah, it looks like a Samsung phone, but a lot of cameras.
Yeah, it does. It looks like, so yeah, it really does. I can't tell any of Samsung's phones apart anymore. Like, you would be hard pressed to tell which Samsung phone someone has. And I guess you could say that of iPhones for a while too, kind of, but I feel like Samsung has gotten real samey since the Galaxy S8. Like, they've all looked basically identical. I mean, that's fine, I guess. Like, they're all going in cases anyway, because using a Samsung phone without a case is like a nightmare because of the edges. But apparently they're not doing like the big waterfall style display. It's staying the same level of curve it has been, which is good. I don't think any of us want a more severe curve on the edges of our screens. Don't think that's the thing we need.
I feel like people are kind of getting over the curve. Like, it looks nice, I guess. I mean, for a while it was really novel and kind of fun. But now it's just kind of, I want my phone to not think I'm touching the edge of the screen all the time. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. The edge reduction stuff is a real nightmare. So we've got some rumored specifications we've seen. We've talked about Snapdragon 865. It might have a 108 megapixel, but probably like been down. Primary camera, a 5x optical zoom, a third regular camera, which I don't know what that means. The time of flight camera, and then there's a fifth camera that has no known purpose at this point. I would guess maybe probably ultra wide. Like,
hey, the layout of cameras on the back is super weird. There are three like large sensors right in a line, and then there's a small one off to the side, and then like there's one below that and kind of at a weird angle, like even further over to the side. I feel like the camera placement in the OnLeak stuff is usually pretty accurate, though.
Yeah,
I just don't know why Samsung would do that.
I mean, I would guess it's like, it's probably just the fact that it's easier to like. Oh wait, somebody's saying we're having audio issues.
Audio is jacked.
We can cut this in post, Jules, but I do not on and off audio issues. Yeah, can you guys describe them? You were stuttering. That's probably the stream issue with the stream box we're using. I'm guessing that's the problem. We'll have to jump. Sorry, guys. It's probably a connectivity thing. Corbin might need to reset the box, or is it run on Cody's now?
I'm not certain.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to play through it, guys. Unfortunately,
yeah. Hopefully it'll get better. If we say something super interesting, you can download the podcast later. It should have functional.
All right, Jules. I'm gonna mark this as a clap so you know when to return to the show. So getting back to the Galaxy S11 here, we were talking about the camera modules, and we had a bit of a technical hiccup, but I think that the placement of the module at this point is probably just a result of Samsung has like packed these phones so tight in the last few years. I think that like just having all of the cameras on one big ugly rectangle, the layout is probably just basically a result of like Tetris and figuring out how the components fit together best. So probably aesthetics don't come into play too often.
Yeah. I will say, though, it looks like they have put the button on the correct side of the phone this time. So that's nice.
Yes, it appears they did not try to build the phone without buttons and then have to reverse course.
Yeah. That is, that we believe that is the reason why the Note 10 has the weird buttons, because it wasn't supposed to have buttons in the first place.
Yeah. So we're seeing that, the rumor is 3 models. I've heard only 2 of them may come to the US, but you've got the S11e, the S11, the S11 Plus. The sizes are basically the same as last year's. They're like a little bit bigger. I think that's because of the the punch hole this time, so that like they can make fit a little more screen in a very similar size frame. So I don't think the phones themselves will probably be any bigger.
Yeah. I hope that the S11e comes to the US. So I mean, I feel like the S10e was the one to get. Everybody really seemed to like that phone. If they decide to not launch that one here, that would be a bummer.
Yeah. I hope they do bring it, but from what I heard at this point, the carriers may not be interested in it. We'll have to see what happens. There's no Bixby button either. There's no headphone jack. But we saw that stuff on the Note 9 or Note 10, excuse me, already. The S11 Plus probably looks to me like you're getting some of the basic design changes that were featured in the Note 10, and then you're probably getting really more revamped internals. So you're getting the newest Snapdragon processor whenever that's announced, probably next month, in a couple of weeks here. You're getting a whole new camera array, which Samsung really desperately needed to update that. The cameras
Yeah.
were getting a little left behind, I think it was fair to say. We'll see if there's a new generation of OLED display. That's always possible with the S line. Usually Samsung can eke out a little more brightness or efficiency or something. I'm sure DisplayMate will be happy to let us know just in what ways it's 8% better than last year's
Yep.
when it comes out.
Yeah. So we can't see a fingerprint sensor on the renders. So presumably it's going to be another ultrasonic in-display sensor, hopefully better than the one in this year's phones rather,
Yeah.
because that was real sluggish. And also apparently it could be unlocked by like any fingerprint if you use the wrong screen protector, which is pretty silly.
Yeah, that was a pretty big screw up on their part. I don't know how they didn't realize that in
Yeah.
testing
Yeah, I
somehow.
mean, and the whole selling point of the ultrasonic sensors was supposed to be that it's more secure than optical sensors, and then not so much.
Yeah. So what I've heard from somebody who has a little bit to know about these things is that the phone will have face unlock. It's unclear if it's going to be secure face unlock, though.
I mean, I
I
don't see
think,
how it could be. There's no room on the front of the phone for like an
yeah,
IR dot projector.
I don't know. I mean, could you like? I mean, we've got proximity sensors that work under the screen. Is it possible to put an IR
I don't know.
projector under the screen?
I feel like you need an open port to like beam that much light into somebody's face.
Yeah, possibly. I wonder, like,
Or
if they just
I wonder if you could do that like with the OLED panel like black. If you
yes,
could have a sensor under the screen that does that, like
yeah.
it would just have like it could just make like a little artificial portal on the screen when you're on the lock screen to like allow the sensor to shine through.
Exactly.
That
That's
would
kind of
be that would be interesting.
that
If
would be
nobody's
interesting.
patented that, I'm gonna patent that right now. Can I patent that by just saying the words?
Well, we know they're already trying to get there with the underscreen cameras. Oppo has demoed them before, and it's possible. The quality of the Oppo ones they demoed was suspect, but it worked. So I have a feeling that all the manufacturers are probably we already, like I said, we already have the under display fingerprint sensor. We have the proximity sensor on the display. And the proximity sensor is basically an IR blaster, like that's essentially what it is. It's just a laser. But I would bet that they've got to be leaning this way for this technology. Apple is probably heavily invested in doing this,
Yeah,
being able to get all that sensor block
yeah,
under the
yeah.
screen.
Yeah, I really want I want Android phones to stop pushing this insecure camera-based face unlock nonsense. I think that is a big mistake and a security blunder.
I think so too, and I think that with Google, finally getting on board with that,
Yeah.
you'll probably see the
Yeah,
OEMs
I
fall
mean,
in line.
and like, and Google took so much heat for like the eye thing with face unlock, but like all these phones you can buy now are like, hey, would you like to unlock your phone with the camera? Which
Yeah,
is substantially less secure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you can, essentially fool it with a piece of paper, if you're clever enough about it. So hopefully the Galaxy S11 does have that. I do know that it still does have an underscreen fingerprint scanner, so that's still going to be an option. I know a lot of people have expressed the desire for both, which it's totally reasonable. If you can have
Yeah.
both, why not?
Yeah, but Samsung phones are already so expensive. If they start putting like multiple biometric packages into the phone, like, start saving your pennies now.
Yeah. So Um, Bulldog asks, what do you think will be the S11 secret sauce? And I think next it's got to be the camera array. I think the camera is going to be the biggest upgrade to that phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Samsung definitely needs to do something about that. For a long time, they were able to just coast on their camera stuff because they were substantially better than every other Android OEM, but that is definitely not the case anymore.
No, it's not. They really do need to step that up. And with that many cameras on the back of it, I really hope they're
Yeah,
serious about it.
what if it's the same? If it's just
Yeah,
like the exact same performance, like, but there are more cameras. They got to get
yeah.
those DxO mark numbers.
But speaking of, like things that could make the S11, stand out from the market a little bit, this kind of segues into our next topic here, which is 5G. From what we're hearing so far, it sounds like, all the S11 and S11 Plus will be 5G only in the United States, which would be a thing. We've obviously, this gets into our next story here, which is that AT&T is the first carrier in the US to do a wide rollout of a low band 5G network. So the next couple of weeks, they're going to have 5 cities by the end of the year, 10 more by mid 2020 that are covered in low band 5G.
Didn't T-Mobile say they were launching theirs on like December 5th or something?
Yeah, maybe.
It's kind of, I mean, it's like AT&T, like, no, we're first, we promise. Like they'll turn it on like the day before in one city, just so they can
Yeah,
say
that's
that they're
possible.
on.
So the AT&T will be first-ish, and T-Mobile
Yeah,
will be first-ish as well.
I mean,
So
but not like it's going to do you a lot of good right away because nobody's going to have a phone that supports
no,
this.
AT&T will have one phone that's going to support it. The Note 10 Plus 5G, their version will support that 850 megahertz 5G
But
network.
not their millimeter wave stuff, which they have in
Nope.
like 10 cities or something.
Yep, it will not support millimeter wave, which AT&T is still calling a business and enterprise only network for the time being.
I mean, maybe they'll just stop doing that because it's real rough. I mean, millimeter wave 5G is really has a very limited use case, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so slow to roll out, and I think if the carriers are really invested in millimeter wave, it's going to be years and years before
Yeah.
we really see it penetrate,
Yeah.
even in those
I
urban
mean,
cores.
I feel like it might only ever make sense in like convention centers and arenas and places where like a lot of people gather and you need a lot of bandwidth and people are like, it like able to like see the antennas, like they have like line of sight to the antennas.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I mean, because like Verizon just they updated their 5G website with actual street level maps of their 5G just the other day, and it's pretty depressing. It is real bad. Like it shows you just how little coverage you get from these cell sites.
The coverage is basically the street, like in the sidewalk. So if
Yeah,
and so that makes it funny to me that AT&T's like, oh yeah, it's for business and enterprise. There's a lot of business and enterprise happening on the
yeah,
sidewalks and streets of our nation. It's
yeah. Illegal business, maybe. I don't know.
it's a pretty bizarre pitch. So probably a lot of people want to understand, like, so there are so many different flavors of 5G, and trying to understand them all as a consumer, especially when they're not actually available to you meaningfully in America, like, is probably very obnoxious. But we'll talk about the flavor AT&T is launching today, which is what it called low band 5G earlier, which so it runs at 850 megahertz. And that's fairly low frequency, much lower than your Wi-Fi at home. Can travel very, very far. A single base station can cover like 2+ miles,
Yeah,
so it can go a really long way.
but much
But
less bandwidth than millimeter wave.
yes, so this 850 megahertz network AT&T is operating. AT&T has what you would call the most chopped up network in America. Like they have the most number of frequencies, but fairly narrow slices of all of
Yeah.
them.
I mean, that's
Um,
helped them with LTE though, because the newer
yes,
modems are really good at band aggregation.
Yes, the carrier aggregation has been like a big boon to AT&T, and that's why AT&T has become like generally the fastest mobile network in the US right now, depending on who you ask. So this new 5G network is launching using a technology called dynamic spectrum sharing, which means it's actually not any new frequency AT&T is using. It's not like they had to shut down an old network to use this frequency. They're sharing the bandwidth and the radio waves with an existing LTE network on this band, which is a part of this DSS dynamic spectrum sharing technology that's part of the 5G spec. So the long and the short of what that means for people is that even if you do get coverage on these DSS 5G networks, which is what this is, your performance gains are going to be very marginal. Source I respect and trust, Sasha Segan was telling me, yeah, you could probably expect like maybe a 30% speed uplift, you
Yeah.
know, and you
It'll be
also,
like very good LTE is what it'll
yeah,
feel like.
it'll be very good LTE, and you probably still will experience the same problems with congestion, the same problems with signal propagation. You're not going to get better signal on this network. It's going to be a little faster. You won't get the ultra low latency benefits at this point. And honestly, it will not be a transformative experience. It will enable the network to be a little more fast, a little faster, a little more efficient, which AT&T cares about a lot on a massive scale, because it's going to reduce their network utilization, which reduces their costs, which means they can have more subscribers and still keep relatively good experience. But for the individual person, this is pretty meaningless. Unless you really, really care about speeds in excess of like 70 megabits versus like 90 to 100 megabits. It's not, you're talking about like, just like two versions of a very similar thing. So yes, it's real 5G, but real 5G doesn't mean what we probably want it to mean, which means the ultra low latency, super fast peak speed, like crazy high capacity networks that a lot of companies like Qualcomm and Verizon have been like talking about, like as the future of mobile technology. This is more of I would call it this is the transitional 5G. It's the 5G that we're going to get for now. And maybe in 5 or 6 years we'll have something really significantly better, but this is what we're getting for the moment. And honestly, AT&T does not have any more cards up their sleeve in the near term to like make a transformative network experience happen.
Yeah. I
They've got
mean,
millimeter wave.
nobody really has good spectrum in the US except for Sprint, which is why T-Mobile really, really, really
Yes.
wants to acquire Sprint. Sprint has a giant mountain of 2.5 gigahertz spectrum that wasn't super useful back in the 4G era, but it is ideal for 5G. It's
Yeah.
basically the only mid-band spectrum that is accessible for carriers.
Yeah, and the mid band is great because the mid band gets you pretty good signal propagation. We're talking like, you could do thousands of feet with this pretty easily. It's like the same frequency as your Wi-Fi network. So think of it as a
Mhm.
really powerful Wi-Fi, router, basically is what 2.5 gigahertz equipment is. And so Sprint has a big chunk of it, a whole 100 megahertz across the entire country. And that width of that band is wider than anything anybody else has got at that kind of frequency, because there aren't many frequencies available for leasing in the US up at these levels. So the US government, the FCC, has to release some more spectrum, and it's planning to, but it's going to take a while. We're
Yeah,
talking
I
a
mean,
couple years.
if they do the auction for that in a year or two, we're looking at least another year or two after that before any carrier deploys something on it.
Yeah. And so Sprint's 2.5 gigahertz network, if you've not really been following it, its performance is pretty respectable. You're able to get, 300 megabits down, which
Yeah.
is that's a pretty big uplift. We're
Yeah, I mean,
talking
and
probably,
their big demo when they launched it was to put everybody on a bus and drive around, I think Houston or Dallas, someplace in Texas, to
yeah.
show people that like, look, it works all over the place,
Yeah.
which
And
is,
it
is important because millimeter wave, as we've seen, it's really unreliable.
Yeah, so I guess it makes sense to break this down, and you basically have three flavors of 5G right now. You have the low band, which in the US is almost exclusively either refarming or spectrum sharing with existing LTE. It's not going to be much faster. It'll be a little bit faster, a little more efficient, changes your status bar icon. That's about the biggest difference you're probably going to notice as a consumer. You have the mid band, which in the US, unfortunately, only Sprint has. And that's really the sweet spot as far as most carriers are concerned with 5G, because you get a big speed uplift, but you still get reasonably good coverage. You can install in areas where it's going to get some building penetration at least. Like it's not totally unable to get through a wall, and it spreads pretty wide. So your equipment costs are reasonable, and a lot of these mid-band networks, you get a very wide band. So the pipe is what carriers would say, it's a very fat pipe. So you can put a lot of data through it and have a lot of users supported. At the very tippy top, we've got millimeter wave, which is a technology that operates at the frequency like that, some new like I guess it's Wi-Fi 6 now. Wi-Fi 6 routers operate at, upwards of like, we're talking like 20 gigahertz, 30 gigahertz, all the way up to 60 gigahertz or more. And these networks are super wide. Like they can be up to like I think 400 megahertz wide or something like that. They can be very, very
Yeah,
wide.
there's not a lot of other stuff up there.
Yeah, exactly. So these networks can operate at speeds like theoretically, like kind of sky's the limit. A gigabit is a good
Yeah.
floor for a
Yeah, I mean,
millimeter wave
I've
network.
seen Verizon's 5G, in real life pull a gigabit down. It just doesn't do that very consistently. It does that if you are standing literally right next to like the transmitter.
Yeah. So, but yeah, millimeter wave just like it doesn't get very far at all. And also, like a tree can block a millimeter wave signal. It's that
Yeah.
sensitive. So it makes sense in, certain venues like arenas, like Ryan was saying, convention centers, you can put it in these kinds of places. And it works really well there as long as you can get everything covered. But you need a lot of base stations in order to do that. And these base stations are expensive. And then putting it outside in cities, which is the other big use case carriers are trying to push, is proving really hard for a couple of reasons. Number one, the number of obstacles in cities, like the number of things the waves are, either going to bounce off of or just fruitlessly hit and nothing happens. And also, where do you put the transmitter stations? Like, you have to work with every stakeholder, every block of every city to get approval to place these things. And so it's proving very slow and very expensive to do. And the chance that it will ever be meaningful in terms of your experience, like on 5G, unless you're in like a major city, you're going to be waiting a long, long time for this if it ever arrives.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a quick break from the news, and we're going to talk to you about the podcast and where you can listen to it. If you're not listening to it live, you can do that on Twitch. We stream 4 times a week. There's 3 podcasts and a Q&A. You can show up to those and interact with us. And we can't keep doing all those shows without the support of our listeners. The best way you can do that is by subscribing on Twitch. If you do that, you get a special emoji of Ryan you can use in the chat room, which is pretty great. Trust me. You can subscribe for as little as $5 a month, or if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you get a free Twitch sub every month. You can just connect your accounts and set that up, and we have instructions on the Twitch page for doing that, and then just renew it every month. That's the only catch. You just have to keep renewing it. But we get money, and you don't have to pay anything extra. So you can learn all about that at twitch.tv/Android Police.
Yes. And so our next story here is about Stadia, and it's a doozy. Like Google cannot have many more things go wrong with this launch, and it just found another one.
So apparently, the Chromecast Ultra, which is the sort of the streaming endpoint for Stadia on your TV, it's not dealing with the heat generated by all that streaming very well. So apparently, some people's Chromecast Ultras are just shutting off in the middle of a game, which is pretty bad. That's not a good thing. I mean, it's not like the Chromecast Ultra has never had a problem like this before. I hear at least occasionally about people having their Chromecast just overheat and shut down, just streaming, regular like Netflix video or something. But Stadia can be a pretty serious amount of streaming. I think if you're doing 4K like that, it's pulling down 35 megabits like continuously while you're playing, which is a lot. It really doesn't, have a lot of time to rest while you're playing. But I mean, I had Stadia to test before it came out, and it was fine for me when I was playing it. I played for probably, I don't know, an hour max, and it didn't shut down for me. But I mean, Google has had a lot more problems with Stadia since it actually launched to everybody. I think people have complained more about lag and latency, which didn't seem like a big problem for me when I used it. But there were also like 100 people probably using it at the
Yeah.
time. But I mean, the Chromecast Ultra doesn't have a fan, so like if it just can't handle that much heat, then it's going to shut down.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, the Chromecast Ultra was not designed with Stadia in mind. Like this piece of a streaming TV dongle. The cool thing about streaming TV is you have this incredible technology called buffering,
Yeah.
and so the Wi-Fi radio can go in sleep mode when it figures out it's buffered enough. So with Stadia, there's no buffering because you
Yeah,
constantly have to be getting the latest frame.
yeah,
So
because you're playing the game. The game doesn't know what you're going to do. There's no way to like get frames ahead of time.
Yeah, so this dongle was built for a use case in which, well, yeah, it can run 4K, but it's running 4K in the sense that it's pulling down a bunch of data maybe for like a minute, and then it can shut down for like almost a minute again or so, or maybe 30 seconds, whatever the interval is. And so that radio can cool off. And with Stadia, the radio is running peak the whole time. And the Chromecast Ultra, I just don't think was designed with that use case in mind. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I wonder if Google will like end up developing some sort of revision of the existing hardware that has like, I don't know, vents or something on it.
Yeah, or I don't know, like sell some kind of like, heat sink puck that you
That
can put on it.
that would be great.
That would be great, but I feel like if they burn out enough Chromecast Ultras, they're going to get sued over this. So it's something they should probably be looking into post haste. I would bet this is also a problem for Chromecasts that are inside like AV boxes or cabinets,
Yeah.
where they're getting hot already with all the equipment in there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Chromecasts are probably crammed into like tight spaces.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you also have like, if you have a TV and the HDMI ports that's connect directly to the HDMI port, the back of a TV panel puts off a lot of heat. So that's also another big heat source. So I think it probably depends a fair amount on your setup. And I'm guessing Google probably didn't do a lot of testing for that, in the lead up to launch.
Yeah, they really should have, though. I mean, it's not like the Chromecast Ultra is a new device. It should be pretty well understood how it behaves at this point. But
Yeah, you would
I
think
feel like in
so.
general, Stadia was incredibly rushed because there are a lot of features that they talked about when they announced it that aren't ready yet. Like, I mean, and there are some things like you can't see achievements. They tell us that like it's tracking your achievements. There's just no UI to see them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very
there are so many things that are missing, and I think that we have a couple talking points here. Maybe like, so do I think a good question that is in our outline here is Stadia actually just being hampered by Google's existing hardware? And I think the answer is almost assuredly yes.
yeah.
Like it's the Chromecast Ultra was not designed with this in mind. Like it's something where they figured out it could do it ideally.
I mean, but I also feel like one of the big selling points of Stadia is that a lot of TVs already have Chromecasts
Yeah,
attached to them. I just
that's true.
I wish that there was. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if maybe if you turn down the 4K support, like just turn down to 1080p, if it would be fine. But I wish that Google had given more thought to how this was going to affect the things they've been selling for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that focusing on the Chromecast Ultra at launch versus the browser experience, I feel like the browser experience is the one where like it's much more accessible. I know that they're doing a staged rollout. This is Google doing a staged product rollout where they're like, oh, you can only use it if you're in the group of people who get sent us $130 and we're rate limiting it to that for the
and
time being.
and like I mean, and even things like phone support, it's like super limited now. It's just the Pixel phones. So like, not only do you have to pay us this money, you also have to have this specific phone if you want to play it on your phone.
Yeah,
Also, the controller doesn't work wirelessly with your phone, so
yeah, it's
find
so
a cable.
dumb.
Yeah, it is. Oh man, and they didn't even announce that they had like a phone mount until right before the launch. Like I remember when it was announced, we're like, why don't they have a phone mount? That seems silly. And now they're like, no, we have one. You can buy it later, and it's also pretty ugly and not super good. But
But speaking of Google making poor decisions, they're sunsetting Cloud Print too, which is a thing. Good old Cloud Print. I remember when that came out, and that was like basically magic.
yeah, it
Like
was.
it was such a cool
It is
tool.
kind of magic. I like Cloud Print. I use it. Whenever I purchase a printer, I check to make sure it supports Cloud Print.
See, I don't use Cloud Print anymore because I don't print away from home ever. And if you have if you have a Wi-Fi printer, it's like, well, it does all, Android supports printing natively.
Yeah. Android and Chrome OS were like the big,
Yeah.
big endpoints for Cloud Print. But now, like, they will work. They can see Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So I've not had a problem with that anymore. My brother printer on my network works totally fine. But I think the issue for me is like Google Cloud Print, excuse me, does work it is effective for a very specific task, which is to take a printer that was never able to talk to the internet and make it able to talk to the internet, in effect. And that is a feature that I think is why, I think that's why it's kind of messed up that they're discontinuing this. Like, printers are one of the most egregious pieces of e-waste on earth.
Oh,
And
so much.
they're so bad.
I can't even count how many printers I've purchased, and then they just break in a year and a half, and I'm like, well, it would cost like I'm not going to pay to fix this. That's like 3 times as much the printer would cost.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And now Google is basically saying, well, all of you people who have managed to keep these like not connected printers in service using our cool little utility, yeah, you're going to have to junk those. It just seems kind of messed up.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder why they're shutting it down. It can't cost them that much to keep CloudPrint running.
I don't think it costs them anything. Like, I think it's probably almost nothing. It's probably just using like the Google Cloud messaging service to like ping down to your, signed in instance of Chrome, which is what then talks to the machine. Like, I think it's probably pretty minimal overhead for Google. I would guess the reasoning is that it's becoming kind of a legacy feature, and probably continuing to support it in Chrome is becoming maybe a little touch and go, where it's like they're going to have to do some serious work, or maybe something is going to break it in an upcoming release and they'd rather like get ahead of that. I don't know. I'm guessing there is some technical reason. Google did not expand on the reasoning. They just said, it's going away. Bye.
And you've got a little more than a year of warning. So that's, better than, just doing it next week, I guess. So you have to transition if you rely on CloudPrint.
Yeah, and so people in our comments section on this post have been freaking out. Like, it's a really popular post. I think people are freaking out in part because they're confused about like Android supporting printing versus Cloud Print. You don't need Cloud Print to print from Android. Like, Android just does that now, so you don't need the app anymore. But the app just did recently pass 1 billion installs on the Play Store. So to say it is not a popular service would seem to strain credulity at this point. Like, it's a lot of people are using this. So I would bet, especially in, certain parts of the world, this is a very popular service, maybe where people are recycling and repairing printers that are old and just, keeping them around, versus, just throwing them away. So that's the part that just seems so egregious to me. It's like Google is just like throwing up the middle finger. Everybody who's keeping, like a reasonably good but old printer in service. So I don't want to think about how many printers they're going to have to throw away.
Yep, it is. Yeah, it is a big mess.
Yep. So I think that about wraps it up for this week's show. And so all the topics we talked about today can be found at androidpolice.com/podcast. We are live 4 times a week at twitch.tv/androidpolice. Podcast is live usually around noon Pacific, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we've got our Q&A show Tuesday afternoons Pacific with Cody and or Corbin. On Twitter, I'm David Reddick at RDRV3. Ryan is at Ryan Whitwam. Our producer, Jules Wang, is at Point Jules, and our theme music is by Home. We've got a big week next week with some great guests to take you through Thanksgiving. So keep an eye out for that on Twitter. Until then, have a great weekend.